Colin Michael Goode was a former gardener employed by Auckland City Parks. He was known for his meticulous work and passion for horticulture. However, as time went on, Goode became increasingly disillusioned with urban life and the societal pressures that came with it. Seeking solitude and a simpler life, he made the decision to relocate to Great Barrier Island. This island, located approximately 100 kilometers northeast of Auckland, is known for its rugged terrain, dense forests, and small population. Great Barrier Island offered Goode the seclusion he desired, but it also presents significant challenges for those choosing to live off the grid. The island's remoteness means that residents must be self-sufficient. For Goode, this was an ideal setting. Upon settling on Great Barrier Island, Goode began cultivating cannabis. This was not an unusual occupation in the island's isolated and somewhat lawless environment. Many residents engaged in similar activities to sustain themselves financially. Goode's work was well known among the locals and law enforcement, who often turned a blind eye to such activities due to the island's community dynamics. Goode's lifestyle was that of a true recluse. He had minimal contact with the outside world. He was known to be extremely cautious, if not paranoid, about his safety. Goode's interactions with others were limited, and he rarely ventured into town. When he did, it was usually to get essential supplies or to sell some of his cannabis crops occasionally. On June 30th, 1999, a gruesome discovery was made on the island. Colin Michael Goode's decaying body was found in his home by a resident who had grown concerned after not seeing Goode for several months. Goode's body was found lying on a double bed in his bedroom. The state of decomposition indicated that he had been dead for some time, possibly since his last sighting in April of that year. Beside him were the remains of his dog. Most disturbingly, Goode's right hand was missing and has never been found. The initial examination of the scene just raised more questions. 2 rifles were found in the bedroom, but it was quickly determined that Goode had not died from gunshot wounds. An extensive post-mortem examination failed to establish any cause of death, leaving investigators at a loss. There were no obvious signs of a struggle or foul play, yet the missing hand suggested that something sinister might have occurred. Something that made this event even more interesting was an incident from 1991 when Goode reported being assaulted in his home by members of the mongrel mob, a notorious gang. The assailants demanded 13 kilograms of cannabis and robbed him of over $1,000 as well as a kilogram of cannabis. This violent encounter highlighted the potential for enemies with motives to harm Goode. The mongrel mob was infamous for its violent activities and involvement in the illegal substance trade. It's presumed that they targeted Goode because of his known involvement in their industry. Living in isolation, without immediate neighbors or friends, Goode was an easy target. This encounter had a profound impact on Goode. Already a recluse by nature, the assault exacerbated his distrust of others and reinforced his desire for solitude. He became even more withdrawn. This self-imposed isolation made it difficult for anyone to keep tabs on his well-being. The initial investigation into Goode's death did not yield any concrete answers. The person who reported Goode's prolonged absence to the police was questioned but quickly ruled out as a suspect. This individual later died in 2002 after consuming an excessive amount of illegal substances. Several theories have been proposed over the years to explain the mysterious circumstances of Goode's death. The first suggests that Goode was killed as revenge by criminal associates. Given the nature of Goode's work and the previous assault by gang members, it is plausible that his death was a result of revenge or a failed robbery attempt by criminals. The missing hand could have been a gruesome message or an attempt to send a warning to others. Another theory suggests that Goode might have died of natural causes or an accident, and his body, left unattended for a prolonged period, could have been partially scavenged by animals, resulting in the missing hand. Others speculate that an unknown individual might have targeted Goode, either for his crops or due to personal grudges. This theory is similar to the first, with the only difference being a group versus an individual. Some have questioned whether Goode might have inflicted harm upon himself in a moment of distress. It is a bit of a less accepted theory, but nevertheless it is a possibility. Between 1992 and 1996, a serial killer was running around Cape Town targeting workers, brutally murdering 26 women and disposing of their bodies across the Cape Peninsula. Despite extensive police investigations, the identity of the Cape Ripper remains unknown, and the case is still unsolved. The early 1990s were a period of significant transformation for South Africa. The end of apartheid in 1994 marked the beginning of a new era of democracy and racial equality. However, this period was also characterized by considerable social and economic change. The transition included issues such as widespread poverty, unemployment, and social disintegration. As a result of these factors, a higher crime rate came about with a growing sense of insecurity amongst the public. The city's marginalized communities, particularly those involved in sex work, were especially vulnerable. They often faced violence, exploitation, and discrimination, making them easy targets for predators. The social stigma attached to sex work made it less likely for crimes against them to be thoroughly investigated and pursued. The Cape Ripper understood this and exclusively targeted sex workers. These workers were often operating in environments that were already dangerous and under-policed. They had fewer resources and less support from law enforcement, making them vulnerable to violence. The first known victim, Christine Fielton, was found on October 28, 1992 in Atlantis, a suburb of Cape Town. Her body was severely mutilated, which would become part of the Cape Ripper's MO. Over the next 4 years, 25 more women would meet similar fates. The following is a list of some of the victims who have been identified: Elizabeth Martin Chich, 29, Sarah Minges, 29, Francina Manuel, 30. Elizabeth was discovered in Worcester in March of 1993. Her body showed signs of rape and mutilation. The next day, Sarah's remains were found with similar damage to the body. About 2 weeks later, Francina's remains were found. She too had sustained the same damage. The transient nature of the victims made it difficult to gather reliable information about their last movements or potential suspects, and due to the high crime rate, it was difficult to separate this string of murders from all of the other crimes occurring at the time. Several suspects were considered throughout the investigation, but none were definitively linked to the crimes. One notable suspect was an elderly, unemployed man living in a caravan near Voortrekker Road. He was brought in for questioning in April 1996 after a worker reported his disturbing fantasies involving violent acts against women. Despite his suspicious behavior and the circumstantial evidence against him, there was no concrete proof to hold him, and despite being let off, this man continued to poke the bear. This suspect later made threatening calls to the police, claiming he would kill more women once his vehicle was repaired. So the man was arrested once more and then released in 1997 since authorities still didn't have any evidence on him. This suspect then went on to accuse the police of misconduct. These accusations included claims that police had planted evidence to secure his conviction. Another lead involved the discovery of a blue and white pickup truck seen near the locations where some of the bodies were found. This vehicle was linked to the suspect living in the caravan, but despite extensive searches and surveillance, no definitive evidence was found to tie him to the murders conclusively. The suspect's erratic behavior and his admission of experiencing blackouts led many to believe that this was the killer, but without solid forensic evidence, the police could not secure a conviction. The police also collaborated with psychological profilers to develop a profile of the killer. The profile suggested a person with deep-seated anger towards women, possibly with a history of violence and knowledge of anatomy or medical procedures. The public sent in numerous tips and potential leads. However, the sheer volume of information, much of it unverified, made it challenging for the police to sift through and identify useful leads. The media played a crucial role in keeping the case in the public eye, but it also contributed to the spread of fear and sometimes misinformation. As time passed, the police faced significant criticism from the public and media for their handling of the investigation. There were accusations of incompetence, lack of urgency, and even corruption. That incident with the elderly suspect, who was released due to insufficient evidence and later revealed to have had evidence planted against him, severely damaged public trust in the police force. Critics argued that the police were not taking the murders of sex workers seriously enough because marginalized groups were beneath them. There were also concerns about the lack of resources and training for police officers dealing with such complex cases. The high-profile nature of the case eventually led to the involvement of more experienced detectives and increased resources, but these changes came too late to prevent many of the murders. Maura Murray was born in Hanson, Massachusetts on May 4th, 1982. She was the youngest of 5 children born to Fred and Lori Murray. Growing up in a close-knit family, Maura was known for her intelligence, athleticism, and determination. The Murrays were a working-class family, and Maura's parents instilled a strong work ethic in their children. Despite facing financial struggles and marital issues that led to their eventual divorce, the Murrays remained a tight-knit unit. Maura was particularly close to her father, Fred, who was actively involved in her education and athletics. Maura attended Whitman-Hanson Regional High School. She was a star athlete, particularly in cross-country running, earning numerous accolades. Maura's discipline and dedication on the track were also mirrored in her academics. Her achievements in both fields got her recognition and scholarship offers, paving the way for her acceptance into the United States Military Academy at West Point. In 2000, Maura received an appointment to West Point, one of the most prestigious military academies in the United States. At West Point, she excelled in her studies and athletics, majoring in chemical engineering. However, the rigorous demands and discipline of military life proved challenging for Maura. After 3 semesters at West Point, Maura left the academy and transferred to the University of Massachusetts Amherst. The reasons for her departure from West Point were personal and multifaceted, including the stringent environment and personal difficulties she faced. At her new school, Maura pursued a nursing degree. She continued to work hard, balancing her studies with part-time jobs to support herself. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Maura Murray experienced several personal difficulties that added significant stress to her life. While seemingly isolated, these incidents together paint a picture of a young woman dealing with considerable pressures and challenges. One of the significant events was a legal issue involving credit card fraud. In November 2003, Maura was caught using a stolen credit card to order food. The card belonged to a fellow student, and Maura used it to make small purchases totaling less than $100. When the card owner noticed unauthorized charges, an investigation led back to Maura. This incident resulted in a disciplinary hearing at her university. Maura admitted to the charges and was put on probation. This legal trouble weighed heavily on her as it jeopardized her academic standing and her future career in nursing. Another significant incident occurred just days before her disappearance. On February 7, 2004, Maura borrowed her father's new Toyota Corolla to attend a party. Late that night, she had an accident while driving the car. The accident took place on Route 9 in Hadley, Massachusetts. Maura lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a guardrail, causing significant damage to the car. The police were called to the scene and a report was filed, but Maura was not cited for any wrongdoing. However, this incident was a major source of stress for her, as she felt she had let her father down. Fred Murray rented a car the following day and took Maura to multiple auto body shops to get repair estimates. He later stated that Maura seemed unusually upset and apologetic about the accident. Maura was also dealing with personal and emotional struggles. Her relationship with her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, who was stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, was strained. They maintained a long-distance relationship, which was challenging. There were allegations of infidelity on both sides, adding further tension. Additionally, Maura's sister Kathleen was going through a drama-filled period, including issues related to substance abuse and a problematic relationship. Maura was deeply affected by her sister's troubles and often took on a caretaker role within her family. Friends and family noticed changes in Maura's behavior in the months leading up to her disappearance. She seemed more withdrawn and stressed, though she continued attending classes and fulfilling her responsibilities. Some friends mentioned that Maura occasionally spoke about wanting to escape and start fresh, though these comments were not taken seriously then. The combination of academic pressures, legal troubles, and personal issues seemed to be taking a toll on her well-being. On the morning of February 9th, 2004, Maura Murray appeared to be planning a trip. Between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m., she searched on her computer for directions to the Berkshires in Massachusetts and Burlington, Vermont. These searches indicated that she was considering several destinations, but it is unclear why she chose these locations or what her plans were once she arrived. At approximately 3:30 p.m., Maura emailed her professors and work supervisors at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. In her email, she claimed she needed to take a week off due to a family emergency. This statement was false, as there was no family emergency then. The email suggested Maura was trying to create an excuse for her absence, indicating that she intended to be away for several days. This action was one of the first clear signs that Maura was planning to leave the area, though her ultimate destination and purpose remain unknown. Around 4 p.m., Maura left her dormitory at her university. She packed several personal items into her black 1996 Saturn sedan, including clothes, textbooks, and toiletries. The items she chose to bring suggested she was preparing for a trip that would last several days. Before leaving, she also printed out directions to Burlington, Vermont, further indicating her intention to travel there. Approximately 3 hours after leaving campus, Maura was seen withdrawing $280 from an ATM in Amherst, which nearly depleted her bank account. Surveillance footage from the ATM showed her alone and calm. She had no signs of distress or fear. After withdrawing the money, Maura went to a nearby liquor store where she purchased a variety of alcoholic beverages, including Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, vodka, and a box of Franzia wine. The receipt from the liquor store was timestamped around 7:30 p.m. These purchases indicated that Maura might have been planning to consume alcohol during her trip, though it is unclear whether she intended to drink alone or with others. After making her purchases, Maura left Amherst and headed north. She is believed to have driven alone, as no evidence suggests anyone else was with her during this time. Her exact route is unknown, but it is assumed that she drove on Route 112, a rural road that would eventually lead her to the area near Woodsville, New Hampshire. At approximately 7:27 p.m., Maura's car veered off the road on the route she was taking. The accident occurred in a remote wooded area with little traffic, especially at night. Maura's car struck a tree and came to rest in a snowbank, causing significant damage to the vehicle's front end. The crash site was about 140 miles from Amherst, suggesting Maura had been driving for several hours before the accident. The first person to notice the accident was Faith Westman, a resident whose house was near the crash site. Around 7:30 p.m., Westman heard a loud noise and looked out her window to see a black Saturn sedan partially off the road and against a snowbank. She saw a woman, presumably Maura, standing outside the car. Concerned, Westman called police to report the accident. During her call, she mentioned seeing a man smoking a cigarette inside the vehicle, but this detail remains unconfirmed and is one of the many ambiguities in the case. Shortly after the crash, Butch Atwood, a school bus driver who lived nearby, drove past the scene. He stopped his bus and offered assistance to Maura. Atwood described Maura as appearing shaken but not visibly injured. She declined his offer of help, insisting that she had already called AAA for roadside assistance. This claim was questionable as there was no cell phone reception in that area, and subsequent investigations showed that no such call was made. Atwood observed Maura for a few minutes, noting that she seemed cold but otherwise normal and calm. After their brief conversation, Atwood drove home and parked his bus. He later called the police to report the accident, noting the interaction with Maura. The local police were dispatched to the scene and arrived around 7:46 p.m., approximately 19 minutes after the accident was reported. When Officer Cecil Smith arrived, he found Maura's car locked and abandoned. The vehicle had significant front-end damage and the airbags had been deployed. Inside the car, Officer Smith found various items, including Maura's gloves, CDs, makeup, and a book on mountain climbing. A partially empty box of wine was also found, with some of the wine spilled inside the car. Maura's debit card, credit cards, and cell phone were missing, suggesting she had taken them when she left the vehicle. There were no immediate signs of a struggle or foul play at the scene. The responding officer and later other law enforcement members searched the area around the crash site. They searched the nearby woods and roadways, but there was no trace of Maura. The temperature that night was around 1 degree Fahrenheit, and the search conditions were challenging due to the cold and darkness. The police checked local motels and hospitals, but Maura did not turn up. Additionally, no footprints or evidence indicated which direction she might have headed. Maura's father, Fred Murray, was informed of the situation the following morning. He immediately drove from Connecticut to New Hampshire to assist in the search for his daughter. Fred was deeply involved in the investigation from the beginning, working tirelessly to gather information and keep the public's attention on Maura's case. He coordinated with local authorities, organized search parties, and frequently spoke to the media to raise awareness about his daughter's disappearance. The search efforts for Maura were extensive and involved numerous volunteers, including friends, family members, and concerned citizens. Professional search and rescue teams were also deployed using search dogs, helicopters, and ground teams to scour the area. The search dogs were able to pick up Maura's scent initially, but lost it abruptly about 100 yards east of where the car had been discovered. This led some to speculate that a passing vehicle may have picked her up. Despite the comprehensive search efforts, no definitive evidence of Maura's whereabouts was found. Flyers with Maura's photo and details were distributed, and information about her disappearance was posted on community boards and in local newspapers. The disappearance of Maura Murray quickly attracted significant media attention. The mysterious circumstances of her disappearance and the lack of concrete evidence made it a compelling story for news outlets. The case was covered extensively by local and national media, including newspapers, television news programs, and online news websites. The media coverage helped raise awareness about Maura's case and generated numerous tips and leads, though many proved to be dead ends. Over the years, Maura's disappearance has continued to garner media interest. Her case has been featured on various true crime television shows and podcasts. Additionally, several documentaries and books have been produced about Maura Murray's disappearance. The case of Maura Murray has given rise to numerous theories over the years. Some believe Maura meticulously planned her disappearance to start a new life. Supporters of this theory point to several actions Maura took that suggest premeditation. The first is the internet searches. On the day of her disappearance, Maura searched for directions to the Berkshires and Burlington, Vermont, which indicates she was considering specific destinations. These searches and her printed directions suggest she was planning to travel somewhere deliberately. There were also those emails. Maura emailed her professors and work supervisors claiming she had a family emergency and would be away for a week. This email provided an alibi for her absence, suggesting she anticipated being gone for an extended period. Some also suggest that the large alcohol purchase was meant to calm Maura's nerves during her trip, since leaving your family behind is a very big decision. There is also another variation of this theory that suggests Maura intended to return, but for unknown circumstances, she never did. As we already know, Maura's life was a mess prior to her disappearance. She may have intended on just taking a break from life out in the wilderness where no one would look for her and then go back home. Then there's the possibility of foul play. One of the most widely discussed theories is that Maura was abducted by a stranger after her car accident. This theory posits that someone driving along Route 112 saw Maura stranded and took advantage of the situation. The remote location, lack of evidence, and the search dogs losing Maura's scent can all be used to support this idea, but there is no concrete evidence to confirm it. Investigators have not identified any suspects or found any physical evidence to indicate that Maura was forcibly taken. Another theory suggests that someone from Maura's personal life was involved in her disappearance. This theory includes various speculations involving friends, family members, or acquaintances who might have had motives to harm her. Maura's relationship with her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, was reportedly not going well. Long-distance relationships can be challenging, and there were allegations of infidelity on both ends. Some speculate that a confrontation with Bill or another individual related to their relationship could have led to foul play. One of the simpler explanations is that Maura left her car and wandered into the surrounding woods, succumbing to the harsh elements. The night Maura disappeared, temperatures were frigid, dropping to around 1 degree Fahrenheit. If Maura had wandered into the woods without proper clothing or supplies, she could have quickly succumbed to hypothermia. Furthermore, the area around the crash site is remote, with dense woods and few buildings. If Maura became disoriented or injured, she might not have been able to find shelter or assistance, but to this day, no remains of her have been located. This theory goes a bit deeper, suggesting that Maura may have fallen into one of the several bodies of water in the area. The currents may have carried her away to a location that officials never thought to search. The case of Daisaku Chiba, a young and talented manga artist, remains one of Japan's most somber unsolved murders. On January 15, 2007, Daisaku Chiba, a 20-year-old first-year student at Kyoto Seika University, was brutally murdered while riding his bike back home in Kyoto. Daisaku Chiba was a promising young artist from Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture. Born in 1986, Chiba showed an early interest and talent in drawing, which evolved into a passion for manga. His family and friends described him as a dedicated, hard-working individual who spent countless hours honing his skills. This passion led him to enroll in the prestigious manga department at Kyoto Seika University, known for being the first university in Japan to offer a degree in manga studies. Chiba's work was characterized by its originality and depth, reflecting his deep understanding of human nature and society. His professors noted his exceptional ability to convey complex emotions and stories through his art, predicting a bright future for him in the manga industry. Chiba was particularly interested in exploring friendship, struggle, and perseverance themes which resonated deeply with his peers. Kyoto Seika University, located in northern Kyoto, is renowned for its strong emphasis on creative arts. Established in 1968, the university quickly gained a reputation for fostering creativity and innovation. Its manga department, founded in 2000, was the first in Japan to offer a structured course for aspiring manga artists. The department attracts students from across Japan and around the world. As a first-year student, Chiba recently moved to Kyoto to pursue his education. He was excited about the opportunity to study under renowned professors and collaborate with fellow aspiring artists. His initial months at the university were filled with enthusiasm as he immersed himself in his studies and campus life. His peers and professors remember him as a friendly and supportive classmate who was always willing to share his knowledge and help others. On the evening of January 15, 2007, Daisaku Chiba was bicycling home on a sidewalk in Sakyo-ku, a ward in Kyoto. Chiba had spent his day attending classes and working on his manga projects. The time was approximately 7:45 p.m. The streets were relatively quiet, which was typical for a residential area during this hour. As Chiba rode his bicycle, he was suddenly approached by an unknown assailant. Witnesses later described the attacker as a man between 20 and 30 years old, with a medium build, standing about 175 centimeters tall, and having medium-length hair that covered his ears. This man was seen swaying from side to side and yelling obscenities. This behavior suggested that he might have been under the influence of alcohol or substances, or possibly suffering from some form of mental instability. Without any provocation, the man viciously attacked Chiba. He pulled out a knife and stabbed Chiba several times in the chest and stomach. Despite the severity of his injuries, Chiba managed to cry out for help. His cries drew the attention of nearby residents and passers-by, who quickly called emergency services. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived at the scene. The paramedics provided immediate medical assistance and rushed Chiba to a nearby hospital. During the frantic ride, Chiba remained conscious but was in critical condition due to the extensive blood loss and trauma from the stab wounds. Unfortunately, despite the medical team's best efforts, the injuries were too severe, and Chiba succumbed to his wounds shortly after arriving at the hospital. A swift and intense response from both the authorities and the media followed Chiba's murder. The Kyoto Prefectural Police launched a full-scale investigation immediately after the incident. They secured the crime scene, cordoning off the area to preserve potential evidence. Forensic teams meticulously examined the site, collecting any physical evidence that might provide clues about the assailant. This included blood samples, possible fingerprints, and any items that the attacker might have left behind. The police conducted door-to-door interviews in the neighborhood, speaking with residents who might have seen or heard anything unusual that evening. Witness statements were collected, and a composite sketch of the suspect was created based on the descriptions provided. This sketch was subsequently distributed to the public through various media channels in an effort to gather more information and leads. News of Chiba's murder quickly spread across Japan, with national media outlets providing extensive coverage of the tragic event. The senselessness of the attack captured the public's attention, and there was a widespread outrage and sorrow. The media played a crucial role in disseminating information about the case, keeping it in the public eye, and urging anyone with information to come forward. The coverage included interviews with Chiba's family, friends, and professors who spoke about his dreams, his talent, and the impact of his loss on their lives. The local community, particularly Kyoto Seika University, was deeply affected by Chiba's death. Vigils and memorial services were organized to honor his memory and provide a space for collective mourning. Chiba's family traveled from Sendai to Kyoto to participate in these memorials. And back to that sketch of the suspect. There were no glaring details about the man, which made the sketch's impact much weaker. It didn't help much, if at all, in pinpointing a suspect. To facilitate the flow of information, the police set up a dedicated hotline for tips related to the murder. Over time, they received over 1,000 pieces of information from the public. These tips ranged from possible sightings of the suspect to information about individuals who matched the description provided by witnesses. Despite this influx of information, none of the leads resulted in a significant breakthrough. The vague description of the suspect and the lack of a clear motive continued to hinder the investigation. In a creative attempt to gather more information and keep the case in the public eye, Chiba's professors and classmates at Kyoto Seika University decided to create an informational manga. This initiative was driven by their deep sense of loss and desire to honor Chiba's memory while aiding the investigation. The concept of the informational manga was to humanize Chiba and highlight his life, dreams, and aspirations. By doing so, his professors and classmates hoped to elicit empathy from the public and encourage anyone with information to come forward. The manga detailed Chiba's journey as an aspiring manga artist, his experiences at university, and his interactions with friends and family. It also included a section that described the events leading up to his murder, the attack itself, and the subsequent investigation. A team of 6 professors and several students collaborated on the manga, combining their artistic talents and personal recollections of Chiba. The informational manga was distributed both physically and online. Copies were handed out at key locations around Kyoto, including train stations, shopping centers, and university campuses. The online version was shared widely on various websites dedicated to manga and crime prevention. The public response to the manga was overwhelmingly positive. Many people were moved by the story of Chiba's life. It sparked renewed interest in the case and generated additional tips and leads for the police to investigate. However, despite this increased attention and the valuable information that was gathered, the case remained unsolved. In addition to the manga, the Japanese National Police Agency offered a reward for information leading to the arrest of Chiba's killer. The reward, initially set at 1 million yen, was later increased to 3 million yen as part of a broader initiative to solve several high-profile unsolved cases. The increase in the reward was intended to incentivize individuals with critical information to come forward. But as you would expect, nothing has come of this, and the case is still unsolved. Chalice Alford was born in a mundane small town on August 31st, 1947, and led a relatively normal life. She grew up in a modest household and was known to her friends and family as an energetic and warm-hearted individual. In the mid-1960s, Chalice married her first husband, Donald Barnett. This marriage, however, was short-lived. Little information is available about her life during this period, but the marriage ended in divorce. While the details are sparse, it is clear that this failed relationship was a defining period in her life, setting the stage for her next, much more tumultuous relationship. In 1980, Chalice met John Paul Sr. John was known by the public as a successful race car driver whose private life was filled with crime. John was a prominent figure in the racing world during the late 1970s and early 1980s. He had achieved significant success in his racing career with notable victories. However, beneath this curtain of success, John was deeply involved in illegal activities, particularly illegal substance trafficking. Chalice's marriage to John drastically altered the course of her life. Marrying into a world of high-speed racing and illicit dealings, Chalice found herself in a dangerous and illegal lifestyle. Chalice went missing at the age of 33 during the summer of 1981. She was last seen in the Florida Keys in the company of her husband, John. The exact circumstances of her disappearance remain murky, but several key details have been established through investigations and witness accounts. Before her disappearance, Chalice was securing alimony from John following their separation. Their marriage had become strained, and Chalice was reportedly seeking financial independence from John. On the day she vanished, Chalice boarded a plane from Atlanta, Georgia to Florida to meet John to discuss their alimony arrangements. This meeting was her last known interaction before she disappeared without a trace. The events leading up to her disappearance begin with Chalice's departure from Atlanta. Witnesses in the area reportedly saw Chalice and John together, but these sightings are the last confirmed accounts of her whereabouts. The investigation into Chalice Paul's disappearance began almost immediately after she was reported missing. Given John's notorious reputation, he quickly became the prime suspect. However, despite extensive efforts by the authorities, the investigation yielded few concrete leads. The absence of physical evidence made it difficult to build a solid case against anyone, including John. Authorities conducted numerous searches and interviews to piece together Chalice's last movements. Despite these efforts, the investigation hit countless dead ends, leaving Chalice's fate in mystery. Several theories have been proposed regarding Chalice's fate. One of the most prominent theories suggests that John murdered her to prevent her from testifying against him or claiming a portion of his assets. Given John's history of violence and his need to protect his criminal enterprise, this theory holds significant weight. John Paul had a known pattern of eliminating threats, threats, as evidenced by his previous attempt to murder Stephen Carson, a former business associate who had threatened to expose him. Another theory posits that Chalice might have been a victim of John's associates within the illegal trafficking ring. The high stakes of their illegal operations meant that anyone perceived as a threat could be targeted. If Chalice knew of their activities or were seen as a potential informant, she would have been a significant liability. A third theory suggests that Chalice may have attempted to escape her tumultuous life with John Paul and start anew. However, given the lack of any evidence supporting her relocation or a new life elsewhere, this theory is less widely accepted. The complete absence of contact with her family and friends since her disappearance further weakens this. Despite the various theories, the investigation has been hindered by a lack of physical evidence. No remains have been found, and no witnesses have come forward with definitive information about what happened to Chalice. The case has remained open, with periodic reviews by law enforcement and renewed public interest occasionally prompting fresh leads, but none have led to a resolution. Now, for some background on John. Born in 1939, he initially led what seemed to be a promising life. He graduated from Harvard with a business degree and began a career that appeared respectable on the surface. However, by the mid-1970s, financial pressures and the lure of easy money led him into the criminal world. His transition into crime began as a means to fund his racing career. Despite his success on the track, the financial demands of maintaining a competitive edge in racing were overwhelming. To bridge this gap, John Paul turned to smuggling large quantities of illegal substances. His criminal activities were not limited to illegal substances. He was also involved in several violent incidents that showcased his ruthlessness. One of the most notorious cases involved an attempt on the life of Stephen Carson, a former business associate. In 1983, John shot Carson multiple times in a bid to eliminate him as a potential threat. Carson survived the attack, leading to John Paul's conviction for attempted first-degree murder and a subsequent 25-year prison sentence. His violent tendencies were further highlighted during an attempted escape from prison. On March 10, 1987, John and another inmate tried to break out of USP Leavenworth by spraying a mixture of hot sauce and pine sol in a guard's face before attempting to scale a 12-foot fence. The escape attempt was foiled when the guard recovered and fired shots, prompting the inmates to surrender. After serving his sentence and being paroled in 1999, John Paul wasted little time before resuming his criminal activities. He quickly became involved in another mysterious disappearance, this time involving Colleen Wood. Wood was an office manager from Ohio who moved to Florida and began a relationship with John. The two planned an ambitious sailing trip worldwide on Paul's boat, the Diamond Girl. However, Wood disappeared in December 2000, just as their journey was about to start. John was the last person known to have seen her, but despite extensive investigations, no charges were ever filed against him in connection with her disappearance. Wood's disappearance had eerie similarities to the case of Chalice Paul, increasing suspicions about John's involvement. Both women were last seen with him and both vanished under suspicious circumstances. Investigators and the public alike began to see a pattern, suggesting that John Paul might have been involved in multiple disappearances to protect his criminal enterprises and eliminate potential witnesses. The disappearance of Chalice Paul has had a profound impact on her family and friends. Her sister, Carla Delphine Alford Power, has been particularly vocal in seeking justice and answers. Carla has tirelessly advocated for renewed investigations and greater public awareness of her sister's case. John Paul Sr.'s son, John Paul Jr., also experienced significant repercussions due to his father's actions. Although he followed in his father's footsteps in the racing world, his career was overshadowed by the criminal notoriety of John Sr. The younger John's racing achievements were constantly marred by associations with his father's illegal activities and the mysterious disappearances linked to him. This case focuses on an individual named Simon Sedano. Simon was a domestic servant in 19th century New Zealand. This case remains one of the more notorious cases in New Zealand's history due to its controversy involving race. Simon Sedano was a Spanish-speaking domestic servant employed by Mr. and Mrs. Robinson in Christchurch. During this period, New Zealand was a growing colony with a diverse population, including European settlers and a smaller number of people from other ethnic backgrounds. The Robinsons were a prominent family in Canterbury, which significantly amplified the public interest in the case. The 19th century was a transformative period for New Zealand. The arrival of European settlers led to significant demographic shifts, resulting in a society filled with cultural diversity and often racial tensions. European settlers held dominant positions in society, while people of other ethnic backgrounds often faced discrimination and marginalization. With all of this in mind, service was one of the few employment opportunities to immigrants and people of color. Simon Cedeno was one example of this. He was employed by a powerful and well-respected family in the Robinsons. Mr. Robinson was a well-known figure in the community, involved in business and social activities. The family's standing in society meant that any incident involving their household was going to attract significant attention. This was particularly true in Simon's case since he was a different race. On the afternoon of January 9th, 1871, a violent outburst by Simon Cedeno resulted in a gruesome crime that would be remembered for its brutality and the racial undertones that surrounded it. The exact sequence of events leading up to the attack remains partially unknown, but reports and witness statements provide a detailed picture of the crime. Cedeno's attack began in the household where he worked during Mr. Robinson's absence. Cedeno first targeted Margaret Burke, delivering a fatal blow to her heart with a weapon. What exactly the weapon was varies from report to report, but it's frequently suggested that it was a knife or similar sharp object. As Margaret Burke lay dying, Catherine Glynn attempted either to intervene or escape. Her efforts were met with violence. Cedeno turned his attention to her. Catherine received wounds to both her face and neck. The injuries were life-threatening, and medical accounts stated that she was in a state of shock when officials finally arrived. One of the most notable details of the crime scene was the bloody handprint left by Cedeno. This handprint became a focal point for pretty much all media outlets. One newspaper used the headline, "Curse of the Bloody Handprint," when speaking about the case. The handprint was reportedly found on a wall near where Margaret Burke's body lay. Many looked at the handprint as a sort of macabre signature from Cedeno. The motivations behind Cedeno's violence have been the subject of much speculation. Various sources suggest that Cedeno harbored deep-seated grievances against his employers, particularly Mr. Robinson. In statements made to the police after his capture, Cedeno expressed a clear intent to have killed Mr. Robinson had he been present. Based on this, investigators believe the two to have a strained relationship, indicating a personal vendetta. Cedeno informed investigators that on several occasions, Mr. Robinson called him a slur and that his heart was equally as black. Mr. Robinson even made these comments in front of guests, which caused Cedeno to feel immense humiliation. Another aspect of the case that has intrigued historians is Cedeno's mental state at the time of the attack. Some reports and later analyses suggest that Cedeno may have been suffering from a form of temporary insanity or an overwhelming loss of control. His defense in court argued that Cedeno was driven by an uncontrollable impulse, possibly indicating a form of monomania. However, due to the racial prejudices at the time, both the court and the public were unsympathetic. If there was ever a justified explanation for Cedeno's actions, it was completely disregarded. He was chalked up to be a deranged and dangerous individual. Even more than the actual crime itself, newspapers emphasized Cedeno's racial background and portrayed him as an outsider, stating that the crime was bound to have happened due to his race. In court, the prosecution argued that Cedeno posed a continuing threat to society. He suggested that such an individual, capable of such violence, could not be allowed to remain within the community. Cedeno's defense presented evidence of mistreatment and verbal abuse, arguing that he had been subjected to significant psychological stress and humiliation. Cedeno's team argued that his mistreatment could have triggered Cedeno's violent outburst. By highlighting Cedeno's good behavior before the incident and the derogatory remarks made by Mr. Robinson, the defense aimed to evoke sympathy and understanding from the jury. Ultimately, the jury found Simon Cedeno guilty of murder. Judge Gresson emphasized that a harsh punishment was needed to deter such events in the future. As a result, he sentenced Cedeno to death. The community agreed with the judge. Simon Cedeno's execution took place on April 5th, 1871. The event was made out to be a public spectacle, with a large crowd gathered to witness it. So if you're like me, you're probably wondering what the mystery is with this entry, and to be completely honest, I'm not entirely sure. I'm guessing it's what caused Cedino to lash out, but it seems that pretty much everyone is in agreement that Cedino resorted to violence because of his mistreatment. I did a bit more digging to understand the case better, and there seems to be debate on Cedino's mental state throughout the event. This leads some to believe that Cedino didn't actually kill to get revenge, but instead he killed because he had a sort of manic episode. There is no concrete evidence of this, but nevertheless it was one of the main arguments that his defense used. This was an attempt to paint a picture that Cedino was not actually capable of violence. On the night of September 7th, 2014, a mysterious explosion occurred near Managua's International Airport in Nicaragua. This event, which left a significant crater measuring 12 meters in diameter and 5 meters deep, sparked widespread speculation and concern. Despite extensive investigations, the true cause of the explosion remains a subject of debate. At midnight, Managua residents were startled by a loud explosion that shook the city. The explosion left a massive crater in a wooded area near the Augusto C. Sandino International Airport. Remarkably, despite its proximity to a densely populated area, the blast did not result in any injuries. The immediate aftermath saw a flurry of activity from local authorities, scientists, and the media as they worked to understand what had happened. The first theory proposed by Nicaraguan authorities was that a meteorite impact caused the explosion. This hypothesis was supported by the event's timing, which coincided with the passing of a small asteroid near Earth. Local officials, including Wilfred Strauch from the Nicaraguan Institute of Territorial Studies, expressed confidence that a fragment of asteroid 2014 RC caused the explosion. Strauch stated, "We are convinced it was a meteorite." Despite the initial confidence in the meteorite theory, several factors led to skepticism among scientists and experts. Notably, no meteorite fragments were found at the explosion site, which is typically expected in the aftermath of a meteorite impact. Additionally, there were no eyewitness reports or recorded sightings of a meteorite streaking across the sky, which would have been visible given the intensity required to create such a large crater. Detailed geological surveys and analyses of the crater were conducted. These studies included 3D imaging of the crater, ground-penetrating radar, and a magnetometer grid study. The results did not conclusively support the meteorite theory. In an attempt to gain more insight, Nicaraguan authorities contacted experts from the United States Geological Survey and NASA. These organizations provided advice and conducted their analyses, but their findings also did not support the meteorite impact theory. As the meteorite theory lost traction, other potential explanations were explored. These included the possibility of a ground-based explosion, either accidental or deliberate, or a natural geological event such as a sinkhole. The wood booger, a Bigfoot-like creature reputed to roam the forests of the Appalachian Mountains, particularly in southwest Virginia, has long been a subject of local folklore. The wood booger legend traces its roots back to local folklore and Native American stories that have been passed down through generations. The name wood booger reportedly originates from the boogeyman due to the creature's rumored tendency to carry off children who wandered into the woods at night. Sightings of the wood booger have been reported for decades, primarily by locals in southwest Virginia. One notable modern sighting, known as the Beast of Gum Hill, was captured on video and investigated by the TV show Finding Bigfoot. This sighting involved a man on an ATV encountering the creature near a river, which has significantly contributed to the creature's modern popularity. Locals often report sightings while hunting, hiking, or during outdoor activities. These encounters typically describe the beast as standing between 7 to 8 feet tall with a muscular build and covered in dark fur. Despite numerous accounts, concrete evidence remains elusive. The existence of the wood booger, like many cryptids, is subject to various interpretations. Cryptozoologists suggest that the wood booger could be a regional variant of Bigfoot, supported by the consistency of sightings across different regions and cultures. This theory posits that the creature might be an undiscovered primate species, part of a broader family of cryptids, including the Yeti and the Yowie. Skeptics, however, argue that the wood booger results from misidentifications, hoaxes, and the human tendency to create myths. They suggest that many sightings could be explained by known animals, such as bears, seen under unusual conditions. The lack of physical evidence further fuels skepticism about the creature's existence.